Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and every year on The Stacks, we discuss and dissect a Toni Morrison novel for the Stacks Book Club. And this year's Toni Morrison discussion is upon us. We are talking about Toni Morrison's 2008 novel, A Mercy, with author and professor Imani Perry. Imani Perry is the author of 7 books, including her latest, a New York Times bestseller, South to America, A Journey Below the Mason-Dixon to Understand the Soul of a Nation. We talk today about the themes of the book, the subversion of historical narratives, and the seduction of beauty. There are also a lot of spoilers on today's episode, so please be sure you've read the book before you listen. Stay tuned to the end of the episode to find out what our book club pick for April will be. If you like The Stacks and want more of it, please head to patreon.com/thestacks to join the Stacks Pack. You'll get perks like bonus episodes, virtual book club, discounts on merch, and shout-outs on the show. Speaking of shout-outs, thank you to our newest members of the Stacks Pack: Kathy Livingston, Donna Anderson, Ashley Lopez, Lillian Yee, Amanda Spalter, Matthew Molly, Kamini, Allison, Annie Vandehay, and Daniela. Thank you all so much for joining the Stacks Pack and putting your money behind the work of this show. The Stacks is a completely independent podcast, so there would be no show without the Stacks Pack. To join this exclusive community and get your perks, head to patreon.com/thestacks. Now it's time for the Stacks Book Club conversation on A Mercy by Toni Morrison with the Imani Perry. All right, everybody, we are back. It is the Stacks Book Club day. I am joined again by the wonderful Imani Perry, author of the most recently South to America, and it's Stacks Book Club. We're going to talk about Toni Morrison's A Mercy. For people who have not finished the book, there will be spoilers, so please finish the book. We're not protecting you from this. Imani, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back to talk about this wonderful book.
I'm really excited. One of my New Year's resolutions this year was to remember to explain the book at the beginning of the episode, because I was getting into episodes where I'd be like 30 minutes in and be like, by the way, this is what the book's about.
Okay.
So let me do a quick, this is not going to be my best work, but here we go. A Mercy is Toni Morrison's novel. It came out in 2008. It is about a group of people living on it's not really a plantation, a farm in the North. I think they're in New York. And it's sort of told through alternating perspectives about the different people. And then there's one person whose voice we hear throughout, which is a young woman named Florence. I don't know. I didn't do a great job there, but we'll get into all of it.
We'll get into it. Yeah.
So we always start here. Imani, just sort of tell us what you think of this book.
So I love this book. I love this character, Florence. Florence is a girl who grows into a woman who has been sold to Jacob Vark, who is the farm owner. And she is somewhere descended from, she was enslaved, but in the Portuguese world, but it's not sort of clearly identified. So there's all these meetings of cultures, right? So Vark is Dutch, and then he has a wife who is shipped over from Europe. And then there's a Native American woman who works on their farm as well. And then there's a black blacksmith. And then there is a queer couple that's in the community that works for them that are indentured. And so it's like this moment of encounter before all of these categories are settled. And it's part of why I love it. And Florence is someone who has lived with the wound of being pushed in her mind from her mother to be the one sold instead of her little brother, right? And it's a misunderstanding. Like, her mother's actually saving her from sexual violence, but she doesn't know this. So there's this wound, right? And everybody has wounds. There's also a woman named Sarah who is kind of like a foundling who's like in the area and is kind of wild, right? As how she's described. And it's a woman-centered novel. It's an encounter with history and like everything. For me, as someone who loves history, to actually be able to feel what it felt like to be these people who speak different languages and who people are dying all the time, and like you don't know what the crop is going to yield, and yet have all these passions and desires. I think it's stunning.
Yeah. Okay. I will go. I will admit to all of you, I am very nervous about this conversation because I am not sure that I understood a lot of what I was reading.
Difficult. Yeah.
It's a really hard book, which I
Uh-huh.
like. I like a
Hmm.
challenge, but I always get very nervous when I have to talk about a challenge on the
Oh yeah.
podcast because I'm like, I'm too stupid for this, which is I'm really glad you're here. You have all the degrees for all
Well,
of us.
you are brilliant. So, but it's hard because
It's
there's
a
all these
really hard book.
perspective changes, and she
Yeah.
doesn't tell you
She doesn't
when you're
explain. Yeah,
changing.
there's no explanation. It's just sort of happening. You have to pick up what's going on. However, the ending, the
Yeah.
last chapter is so incredible. I
Yeah.
got that. I mean, I was like, holy cow. Like the ending just
Yeah.
really, I think the last two chapters, because it's Florence and then it's her
Yeah.
mother. And I, of course, I love Toni Morrison's writing. I love, there's so much like lushness in her
Mm-hmm.
sentences. This
Mm-hmm.
was also my first late Toni Morrison. So
Okay.
I have only read the books we've done on this show, which are The Bluest Eye, Beloved, Sula, and now Song of Solomon. And so this is our fifth, A Mercy. And so it was really different. It's
Yeah.
really different. And like one of the things that I know that I loved from the ones that I'd read prior are the scenes and like
Yes.
how suspenseful the scenes are. And in this book, she's really like sort of found a little more calmness in
Mm-hmm.
her
Yeah.
scenes. They're not so intense. And so I think I also was like waiting for what I thought was
The
coming. Like
dramatic scene. Yeah.
yeah, like I was
Yeah.
waiting for those scenes that just aren't they're in there, but they're not as clear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what happens is that Morrison, I think, made a decision, and she banked on us having, in a later work, we had earned her trust. And so
Mm,
she doesn't tell us everything.
yeah.
So, like, so you could imagine there's a scene where Florence is jealous of the man she loves who ultimately rejects her because she's too wild and she's a slave and he's a free black man, and it's a sort of devastating
Right.
encounter, and she's jealous of a child he's taken in. Again, we said there were spoilers, right? So there's
Yeah.
spoilers. So
Yeah.
she's jealous of a child that he's taken in. She hits the child. And but it's not a scene that is described in the way, for example, the scene in Beloved is in the,
Right.
when school teacher and the other guys come in, where you like know everything that's going on. Like you can easily read by this scene and not, it's not like she struck the boy across the face. It's like,
Yes. Yes.
it's like a series of emotions and responses and anger. And so you discern it, but on the other hand, it feels like what it feels like when you're in one of those dramatic scenes,
Yes,
right? Like where you're kind of
exactly.
breathless and you don't know what's going on and the words don't come to you. Like, so yeah, it is different. She pares down so much.
Yeah. I feel like this is one of those books on a second read. I will appreciate it so
Hmm.
much more because I was doing so much of like, what's happening? Wait, what's going on? Like
Hmm.
I had to reread that section a few times because I was like, wait, why did she hit, what's
Right.
happening? What?
What's
I
happening?
was like,
Right.
and then I was like,
Yeah.
wait, is this his kid? Like like there's
Yeah. Yeah.
so much of like reorienting at the start of
Hmm.
every little chunk. And so that's always, that's just tricky for me as a
Yeah.
reader
Yeah.
because I really like my background's in the theater, so I'm very like
Oh,
scene oriented, which is like the kind of fiction I really love are books that
yeah.
have like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like Passing, for example. Like that's basically a play, like it's like so many
Hmm.
scenes.
Wouldn't it be fun
Um,
to, she wrote plays. It would be so
I know.
fun to do staged readings of her plays.
Oh my God, it would be a dream.
Okay, that's an aside, but yeah.
I wish more authors that I love would write plays, but plays are so
Yeah.
hard
They're
and
so
different.
hard. Yeah.
It's just like such a different thing. I'm currently reading through August Wilson's Century Cycle right now, one a
The
month.
best.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I love that.
There's I love a play. But so when I read a novel, I feel like I'm always searching for the
Mhm.
scenes because that's how my brain understands narrative best, I think, because
Yeah.
that's like my background. But I am curious. I want to ask you. So for people who don't know, we do a Toni Morrison every year, and I usually try to find the right guest and then just let them pick the book. And you picked this one. So I want to know why
Yeah.
you picked A Mercy.
I mean, I love the Mercy. Morrison, part of what's amazing about her that I think is different, Morrison dwells on the mother wound, right? Like, and
Mm,
there are so many terrible mothers in Morrison's work. Like, there's a
yeah.
lot of terrible mothers, and she has no,
Yeah.
and I think it's just sort of amazing for someone who was a mother
Hmm.
to dwell in sort of the problems of motherhood as a writer. I think it's
Mhm.
very courageous. And in this one, though, she tries to get to a healing. And
Yeah.
that doesn't really happen in the others so much. Like you just sort of have to make do with the disaster at the end. But this one, she tries to pull it back together and to make sense of that. And so that part, I think, for me, that's really important because she's a philosopher as an artist, right? And to think about, so she's asking us to think about really core wounds that
Mm,
we experience from people we love deeply, and how do you not allow those to eat you up?
yeah.
And so it's a story, but it's a big question for the reader. And the same with the love story, right? And she's had other love stories that are like instructive in various ways, like whether we're talking about, in Beloved, where, Paul D is like, listen, Setha, your best thing. Like, it's not
Right.
Beloved, and it's also not me. It's not, this is, and we have Hagar in Song of Solomon, who's like, you know, essentially destroys herself out of love for Milkman. And
Right.
so here's another story like that, where here this is a Florence is sort of obsessed with this blacksmith who is cruel, even if he's right in some ways. But I
Right.
I think it's good, though, in this book that Morrison lets us know that there's a cruelty there, right? Like that
Hmm.
it's not just that it's her fault for falling so deeply in love and being willing to do everything, but that he hasn't treated her. And his obsession with his status as free is not necessarily a virtuous thing. So I like that she's also telling us something about like heartbreak
Hmm.
and how we can destroy ourselves in moments of heartbreak, but also that people have a responsibility to treat others tenderly. I just think there's big lessons from the book. And so,
Yeah. This definitely feels like a big lesson book for
yeah,
sure. Like I feel like
yeah,
she was like, I gotta tell the people some things.
right.
Like, I've written a bunch of books. I gotta get some things
Uh-huh.
off my chest,
Oh, yeah, and then there's also the white people in the book who get worse
Yeah.
here. Like I don't love that they get worse, but like, there's Jacob and Rebecca, husband and wife, they have a great marriage. They go through all this heartbreak, their children die, they're like trying, but and then Jacob gets obsessed with being wealthy and
Right.
building this big house and all this stuff. And then, and Rebecca's heart is broken because their children die. And so Jacob's values shift because he just wants to become rich, like, like
Right.
the Europeans. And Rebecca becomes cruel, and she has these close relationships with Lena, who is the indigenous woman, and Florence, and not with sorrow, but they're all part of the same household, and she pushes them away because of, and becomes sort of status oriented because of her heartbreak. And so you get, and like becomes white, as it were, right,
Right.
in a way. So
Oh,
that's
that's so
also really
good.
interesting. Yeah,
I hadn't thought about that as like the becoming white with the capital W.
at the capital
Um,
W. Yeah.
Because I mean, one of the things I did think about was like in Beloved also, and when we did Beloved, Damaris Hill was our
Hmm.
guest, and she,
Oh, I
I
love
mean,
Damaris.
she oh my God, she broke that book down. It's still like one of my favorite episodes because I also really struggled with Beloved. But one of the things we talked about on that episode was like about the benevolent slave owner because
Hmm.
they, at the beginning of Beloved and also at the beginning of this book, she sort of sets up the people who own other humans as like not so bad. Like
Right.
Jacob's like not so bad.
Hmm.
And I took the note immediately when I started reading about him in this book being like, "Oh, she's doing it again.
Yes.
She's doing that thing where she's kind of like playing to our against
Yeah.
like what we think of slave owners, right? Or like people who own others. And then, he falls apart just like what
Yes.
happens in Beloved, and
Yes.
like he has that line, or there's that line where it's like nothing makes Jacob as mad as brutal handling of domesticated animals. That I was like,
Hmm.
well, what about the fucking handling of
Yes.
people? Like
Yes.
it's just such
It's
she
such
has
a
these like
brilliant line.
lines. Yeah. Yeah. And like
It's such
and
a
then
brilliant line.
also like the mother sort of Florence's mother sort of redeems Jacob a little bit, right? At the
Hmm.
end where she talks about like his seeing of humanity in her daughter and like the humor in her and like
Right.
seeing her as a person. And that was, I'm often confused about what Toni Morrison is saying about the people who owned other people,
Right. Mm-hmm.
because she definitely is doing a lot of work to find humanity in them as well.
Right. Well, I mean, I think what she's doing, and I also just say, it took me 3 times to understand Beloved.
Yeah, that's hard.
It was a hard book.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
it became my favorite. Then it became my favorite book for years. And then The Mercy
Hmm.
became my favorite book. But
Okay.
I think what she's doing is actually trying to reach for the truth in him.
Hmm.
Like, so when, so Minya Mai, Florence mother, says he looks at her and sees a child, right? And that's true, I'm sure, right? I mean, in terms
Hmm.
of true, in terms of the history of slavery, right? That these are human beings who are living in incredible physical intimacy and facing the hardness of the environment together. And I think for me, and this is part of, for me as a writer, one of the things I think is so important is to remember that, yes, these are people, they were close together, and also there was incredible cruelty and violence and
Yeah.
race, right? Because that actually makes it even worse,
Right.
right?
Right.
There is this intimacy, right? And to understand that part of humanity seems to me to be like one of the scariest but most important things. So I do think, yeah, he could see her as a human, but also doesn't blink at like what it means that he's taking his child away from her mother.
Yeah. And you talk about that like close, intimate violence in your book.
Oh
I
yeah.
think it's in Maryland, right? When you're talking about
Yes.
Esther Easter
Yeah.
and the kitchen and like I think when this is I am both black and Jewish. So I think a
Yeah.
lot about the Holocaust and slavery. Even though
Yes.
my family was not in Europe at the time, where they weren't in they were Russian, they came before. Anyways,
Yeah.
but I think a lot about how these atrocities, and you could include other ones, but these are the two that are personal to my family, about how it's really people. Like it's really
Yes.
people to people. It's not drone strikes, right? Like we're not talking about and I
Yes.
think we forget, like, and I don't know, but I know that I forget, even though I don't know how I possibly could. But it's almost like too big to understand or to think about regularly.
Yes.
Like I
Oh
know there's
yeah.
all this language about people who are like, don't say slave, say enslaved, right?
Right.
Because that like the people aren't slaves, but it's almost like all of the language around slavery and all of that stuff was built that way so that we could disassociate from the
Oh yes.
horrors of it. And so it's
Yeah.
hard to like think of her as a child. Like it's hard to think of people who were brutalized and owned and, broken, their spirits broken, all these. It's hard to really actually take the time to think about what that means and like what that looks like,
Oh
and
yeah.
then to think about it on that scale, because
Right.
it's not one child who's like sold into
Oh
slavery,
no,
right?
right.
It's like hundreds of thousands of millions of people, like,
Yeah.
and the scope of the whole thing is overwhelming and almost impossible to take in.
Right. I mean, to me, this is a really important point that you're making about language and writing, because this is part of why we need literature, right? So you need the particular story to be able, I mean, it's like why, if you hear somebody say 100,000 people died, it doesn't have the same impact as if you tell the story of one slow death, right?
Mhm.
Emotionally, it just
Mhm.
becomes, it's
Mhm.
too overwhelming. So we need, but we do need the research that tells us everything that happened, right?
Right.
That we need that kind of writing. And we also need the intimate story writing, right? We need to be able
Yeah.
to access the past. And it goes back to that formulation in Beloved. It was not a story to pass on. It wasn't and that there's a double entendre there, right? Because you do have to tell the story. She's telling the story, but you
Right.
can't tell it.
Right.
You have to be careful with how you tell it. You can't tell it all the time. You can't tell, right? So it has to be manageable for us to function. I mean, I give you an example because I wrote about it in South to America, but it's a much bigger story. But about all these Nazi scientists came to Alabama after World War II that
Mhm.
NASA hired for the space race, and one of them, von Braun, was a man who was in the camps right next to gas chambers. And they told this fictional story, but there were survivors who were like, no, he was there, right? Like he
Mhm.
wasn't just
Mhm.
a scientist, right? So they bring them to Jim Crow, Alabama, right? And we know the
Mhm.
relationship between, Nazis and the architecture of Jim Crow. And he has this status that the Black, who literally a Nazi, that the
Right.
Black people who fought against
Right.
fascism don't, right? And then people will talk about, well, but but he wanted to integrate NASA. And it's sort of like, to me, and people have responded to me because I didn't write about that part, but I'm like, but so what? But it's also,
Right.
it's like people want to compartmentalize. But this is actually a really horrific revelation, because you realize that winning the space race was more important than, in that moment, for the federal government, than what had happened to Jewish people in the Holocaust.
Right. And also what had happened to Americans to fight against what was happening,
Right.
right?
And what was happening in their very midst, right? Like all of the,
Right.
and
Right.
so then you say, well, that
Right.
is the primary driver, is winning the space race with this person who has all of this violence, right? There's all these layers of violence on the grounds of where there were like enslaved people whose graveyards were papered over to build the arsenal. You
Right.
know, so
Right.
it's a lot. It's to your
Right.
point.
It's a lot. Yeah. But I also think that like that still happens right now, this very moment.
Mhm.
You know, like we're still finding ways to redeem horrible people because they have some value that we think is more important than whatever their horribleness is.
Yeah.
I can't think of a great example right now, but the only example that's coming to my mind is like Joe Rogan.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, he provides this. He's a great
He's
interviewer. Like,
entertainer. Right.
okay, so what? Like,
Right.
he's also a raging racist
Yeah.
and homophobic
He's
person and white
horrible.
supremacist. Like, he's horrible. And I get that it's entertaining, but like, is that the most important thing? Like,
Right.
what is the thing that we care the most about? Is it the space race, or is it the extermination of 6 million Jews and millions of
Yeah.
other people? Or is it, the American lives lost, and we could talk about
Yeah.
the ways that we claim to care about the people who fight in the American military. But I think
That's a whole right.
that's a whole other thing.
It's a
That
whole
is,
thing unto itself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I do think that like these small moments of humanity and like you're saying, truth within the system of American chattel slavery is always really like, it's jarring because
Yeah.
it's a reminder that it is people. And like I think you say in your book, like it's not just people, it's people who like lived together and like
Yes.
were close to one another and like knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like your housemates.
Yes.
Like your housemates owned you and beat you.
Yes.
And killed you. And like you have the story, I can't remember the person's name, who the brothers chop up his
Oh,
body.
yeah.
And like it's just like
Yeah.
such brutality and horrificness. I don't know if
Mhm.
that's a word. And like among people who now, if you lived in a home with someone, you would consider like your nearest and dearest,
Of
right?
course.
Like
Yes.
it's
And then,
just
but to me, this is also why, I guess, and this is, I think it's part of the virtue of the book, right? Because like when we talk about something like domestic violence, right? Or child
mm,
abuse, child abuse, these
right,
things, like we separated them out from these larger social practices, but they're actually so intimately connected because we have
mm,
set the stage in our culture in so many ways for intimacy to not necessarily mean kindness or care, right? That's
right,
not, and it's a lot of it has to do with patriarchy. A lot of it
hmm,
has to do with various forms of status. So to me, and when we're in the house and we see the growing cruelty, we're seeing something that we can recognize when we talk about abuse and patriarchy and sexism,
mm,
but we're also seeing something that we can recognize when we talk about racism and the construction of
sure,
race, right? Those are there. And I think that the mastery of like understanding that those things are really intertwined is so important,
right,
because they like reflect back on each other,
right. You're
Yeah.
just making me think. I'm going to do like an English teacher question for you. Or I'm going to ask you and you tell me if I'm right because you probably know. Do we think that the houses are a metaphor for America? Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
what that's supposed to be?
Yeah. I think they're a metaphor for America, and they're also a critique of the ideals of the American dream, right? Like I
Sure.
mean, we literally talk about, white picket fence. We talk about the house as a representation. And by the
Right.
time the house is built, everything is dead in this book. Jacob is
Right.
dead, right? Like the children are dead. That's not incidental. right? This aspiration for what? I mean, there's that. And it's another thing that Morrison picks up again and again, aspiration for what? But also houses are dangerous places in Morrison's work. From
Yeah.
124 to, that the house in the old plantation house and Song of Solomon to the house in Paradise. I mean, houses are complicated, right? They're these sites of aspiration, but they're also the sites of enclosure and disaster, and they make space for like, and so this is really interesting. So there's an article by Horton Spillers written in 1987, Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, an American Grammar. And in it, she talks about like sort of where Black women fit in the domestic structure of the US nation. And she uses this term vestibular, like in the vestibule, right? Like, and they're writing, Morrison and Horton Spillers are talking to each other as she's writing that article and Morrison is writing Beloved. So they're talking about houses and like the house as a metaphor for the country. So all that to say, yes, that's actually explicitly in the minds in Morrison's mind and others who she's in conversation with.
I don't know. I'm starting to think back of the houses in the books. Like I'm thinking of the house in Sula, too, and Song of Solomon, of course.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Oh my gosh, this is what's been fun about reading Morrison for the show is like getting to talk to different people and them adding different insights. Like I get to think back to the earlier. It's just like really, I feel very lucky whenever we get to do this. Okay, let's take a quick break and then we'll be right back. Valentine's Day is upon us, and I've got love on the brain. Love for books, duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind the scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to tracythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. Okay, we're back. I want to talk about the names because you are a professor, and I know professors think about these things a lot. And so I feel like you might have some insights. I think Rebecca and Jacob, that's biblical.
Yes.
I know that.
Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And because Rebecca's his like most beloved wife, right?
Yes.
I know that from Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, everybody. Thank you.
Yes.
But what's up with Sully and Willard?
Oh, I don't know. I spent a lot of time in growing up in Massachusetts and Chicago, so I think of Sully as a classically Irish nickname. Sully.
Oh, okay.
Right? Like I'm used to. Like I don't know what that. I have actually hadn't thought about the symbolic meanings. That's a great question, but
because I know she's like really into names, like all of the names in the books. I mean, Song of Solomon is like a book about names, obviously. But like I don't know.
And
Jacob
of course,
and Rebecca
Sorrow changes her name.
Yeah. So, and Sorrow's name, we kind of hear about like how she got the name. It's like a very literal, she's sad. So they started calling her Sorrow because she wouldn't say what her name was.
Right.
But what about Florence? Do you have any sense of that?
I mean, I don't know. I thought about it in terms of her as capturing something of her personality.
Mm.
she's floored, and that's what puts her at risk, right?
Oh,
She wants shoes, and she likes pretty things, and her
right.
mother's like, that's going to be your demise because
Right.
you can be controlled by your desire, right?
Yeah.
But I don't
Yeah.
know. Um, it's a good, yeah, it's a good question. Um, no, I
I
don't know.
I don't know
Um,
either.
but I do, but just in terms of sorrow, I feel I love it, but I also feel a little bit of, I don't know, conflicted when she renames herself Complete after she has a child.
Yeah.
As a mother, I'm like, I don't know, like, are we like the idea that your mother and now you're complete, but it also
Yeah.
sounds very Puritan, right? Puritans would choose names like that, like
I
simple,
just
simple,
yeah,
yeah,
I don't so I'm a mom and I just don't relate to a lot of that like
yeah,
mom
stuff,
narrative in
yeah,
general. Like I don't I like my kids. I love my kids,
right.
but like I don't feel
They're not your whole life.
no,
It
not
can't
at
be.
all.
It's not good for them as
No.
a model if you are. Yeah.
Right. Like I didn't even have the like instant the moment I saw them that whole like my life has changed. I was like,
Right.
"Oh my gosh, there's people now
Right.
here who live here."
Right.
Like I just I
Cute
can
little
never
people.
relate to
Yes.
those things. Yeah, it's just there's two more people in my house and they are very needy. They're
Yes.
demanding. I think another thing in the book that like I kept noticing and I think it's very obvious is like the orphaned people. Like
Yeah.
everyone who comes to the place is like on their own.
Yeah.
No one comes with someone I guess except for the guys,
Yeah.
indentured guys, but even they have their own like independent
Mm-hmm.
backstories.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it begs the question of like who owns who, like who's
Right.
responsible for each person because they all sort of got there. They all
Right.
sort of ended up there because they were forced there for different reasons and like
Mm-hmm.
who's in charge like autonomy. I don't know, it's sort of like autonomy is a joke, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not real. Like
Yeah. But it's sort of isn't, I mean, that, don't you think that's sort of another way that it's a kind of an American origin story?
sure.
Yeah.
Because we all sort of ended up here.
Mm-hmm.
We're forced here. Yeah. Yeah, I think but I also think it like goes against a lot of the narrative about America too, which is like that we all belong to this thing. We all belong to each other in this way is like how America wants us to think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I
Sure.
don't think that that's true necessarily.
Oh no.
And yeah, and like I mean especially, you know, people who are descendants of enslaved people in America, like I think you know, if you've seen Roots, you know, if you've had any experience like you know that we were sold from our families
Right.
regularly.
Yes.
And like so yeah,
It's
I
all
mean
this fragmentation. Yeah. Yeah. Or
just so
even,
much of it.
I love that the detail that she has. I don't love it because it's terrible, but I love that that Morrison added about the details about how they wouldn't allow the children who died to be baptized, or the local church, and the kind of
Yeah.
cruelty of the rules of the church, because even that mythology of like churches as anchors or community institute,
Right.
that she really showed how the kind of the fragmentation and the exclusion that came from the outset, right? So,
Yeah. I would love I'm really not a church person. I don't know much about the church. I wasn't raised in the church. And so I that's always like a big missing spot for me when we talk about a lot of Morrison actually has a lot of church related
mhm.
things. What did you make of the religious politics in the book? Like I think a lot of that went over my head because I don't know about
Yeah.
that.
Well, I mean, I think it was an accurate characterization of how exacting and cruel so many of the Protestant sects
Mm.
were. And then also I loved the discussion, the kind of judgment of the sort of excesses of the Catholics and the idolatry when Jacob's
Mhm.
assessment, when he goes, because it was apt, right? Like they had very different ways of navigating this horrific institution, which is interesting because, I mean, implicitly, part of what Morrison is kind of showing is, the Catholic countries, there was more sexual interaction. Those countries, the slavery of those countries, like Spain and Portugal, there's more sexual violence committed against Black women than in and Protestant. Not, of course, they're
Oh,
terrible in both instances, but that's
I didn't
part
know
of
that.
I think that's part of the subtext, right?
Mm.
With Florence coming from a Portuguese, and they have that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just jumping all over, but one of my favorite sentences in the book is about the Angola part of Portugal, right? The idea that Portugal had laid claim to all of these places in Africa and that it
Mm.
becomes part of.
Right, right, right.
And so they come from, so she comes from there where there's a lot less censure from the church about interracial sexuality there than in Protestant countries. So that also may have been why Jacob was seen as a safer place.
Mm. Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, but they all are so exacting and judgmental, and you see that it has to do with the harshness of the environment. They like sort of have these very stoic dispositions around religion, but they also mean that they're cruel to people in
Right.
their midst. Yeah.
What do you make of the dying of Rebecca and Jacob's babies?
I mean, I guess I thought about it as both a meaningful plot device and historically accurate. Kids, there just lots of kids didn't make it, right? I guess for me, what part of what Morrison is doing is for those of us who, Morrison centralizes Black experience and Black life, right?
Mhm.
But she's in this book, she's also reminding us that, like, the way that we talk or even imagine a slave society tends not to dwell on the adversity faced by the white people in our midst.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
And I think it's really important because it's not as though she's doing apologetics,
Mm-mm.
but at all, but that was real, right? Babies
Right.
died. The scene when Rebecca comes over, for me, is one of the most powerful scenes in literature because it's like you don't think about how much for women like her, they came to this country in conditions that were not wholly different from enslaved people in the hold of a ship.
Right. Right.
Right? Like in a disgusting
Right.
hold of a ship. There's this line, it's one thing, to live in your own waste. It's another to live in other people's waste. So, Rebecca, a white woman, comes here that way too.
Mhm.
And she experiences all of this loss of her children, and it is physically demanding, and she's heartbroken, right? And they are like a family. But then there's a point when she decides, I'm going to become the mistress of this plantation. And
Right.
I think that there's something, it's both accurate, but it also helps us rethink,
Right.
the institution of slavery, the history.
Why do you think we as in, I guess, people who learn and live in
Hmm.
America, I'll say it that
Yeah.
way. We don't talk about the difficulty for white people during that time, because I feel like
Hmm.
so often, like, especially, in a white supremacist society, we're always trying to find ways to make white people more
Yeah.
sympathetic. And I just think it's interesting that that's not something,
Oh,
like, I've definitely heard white people talk about, like, my family was too poor to own slaves, so, like,
right.
I'm absolved of slavery. But, like, we don't talk about, like, how hard life was, just, like, period.
Right.
And then
Hmm.
for white people, on in addition, I guess, to just general.
I mean, I think we don't, it's because we don't talk about class in this society.
Mm.
And I think it's also because of, what Du Bois classically called the wages of whiteness, right? It's being a psychological wage. So this conception of oneself as white is also about belonging to the superior group, which means that people will say, oh, my family was poor, but not my family was oppressed and exploited in the
Right.
service of a white supremacist order that we didn't benefit from, right? Like,
Right, 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 right.
financially, right? I mean, now, I mean, I think there are people who will talk about, like, miners or yeoman farmers, but not people who don't want to put it all together, right? Like that here are white people who are at the bottom of a hierarchy who are suffering, but who are disciplined from identifying with Black people by saying, well, you're white, so you're a little bit better, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I also think we love a plantation drama
Sure.
in our society, right? We
Sure,
do.
I
And
do.
we love royal. I mean, I've been watching The Gilded Age, which is a fantastic TV
Oh,
show.
yeah.
But I'm also like, gosh, like we really do, from Bridgerton to The Guild. Like
Right.
we like to watch. rich people and their melodrama. And so
Well,
we
that's what
don't
you're saying,
get,
the
yeah,
seduction of beauty
yes,
again.
yeah.
Like
So
when I think about my love of Gone with the Wind, the thing that always comes into my mind first is the dress that Scarlett wears, the white and green dress with the big hat when she
yeah,
goes to the picnic. That's like
that's the image.
my
Yes.
that's the image. And it's because I love that dress. Like I
Yeah.
think half of the reason I love Gone with the Wind is because I think Vivian Leigh is so beautiful and I
Yes.
think that her clothes are so beautiful and I think, it's beautiful. Like
Yes.
it's so gorgeous to look at.
What's your
I
favorite
also
color?
love
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I'm like black. I don't
Okay.
know. I'm not
Okay.
really like a
You're not a
color
color
person.
person? Oh, that's interesting.
I like vivid colors. I like pretty things, but I
Yeah.
don't have like a favorite color.
Okay.
But I do love the red dress she wears, of course. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the sexy red. Like the clothes in that movie are so
Perfection.
important to my life. Like I
Uh-huh.
don't like I think about them and I love Scarlett. I love that she's like a badass. Like
Yeah, yeah.
she's like my Lady Macbeth, right? Like I
Okay.
love Lady Macbeth. It's like that same I think of them in the same place, but I do think so much of like the seduction of beauty is what I love about Gone with the
Yeah.
Wind. Like, cause I even love Mammy's red petticoat,
Yeah, yeah.
like I think about that beautiful thing and I
Yes.
think it's so fucked up when you think about
Right.
what you're talking about.
Mhm.
But like the way that we can erase so much with like wealth and beauty and pretty people and pretty things is very scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
It's
mean,
scary.
it's scary. And I think the question is then not to, I mean, there's that, and that's that scene, right? When he's at, oh, I can't think of his name.
The
The Portuguese guy's
Portuguese,
house, right?
yeah,
And he's like,
Senor.
Senor, and he's like, he's horrified, but he's also enchanted because it is really
Mhm,
beautiful. And
mhm.
then, and he wants it. And I think that that's such a beautifully written scene because we know what that feels like. Like, when we're like, "Ooh, that is nice," right? And we
Yeah,
might think like, "Oh, it's so
yeah,
excessive, but ooh, it's nice," right? Like that
yeah,
feeling, and it's real, right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's human, and so I think so that's why I think what is great about this book is it resonates with that, and we get why
yeah,
everybody's so excited when the house is being built and it's going to be so beautiful, and then there's also this rot at the core, and it's also but they
yeah.
want it because they've had such a hard time already. Like it's you get
Right,
all the
right.
layers, right? It does he doesn't
Yeah,
that Morrison is always pushing us. He's always like pushing buttons about beauty. Like when you get to the very last one that she published, it's all about like so much is gets to the sort of dangers of beauty. So repeated thing.
I think also like she's always kind of subverting what we think we know about things, and
Hmm.
like I think one of the ways she does that with this book is setting it in the North.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's a choice that is very much like, oh, you think this is just a thing that happens in the South, right?
Right.
Like that's in conversation with your book for
Hmm.
sure. Like, oh, you think that the South is the only place
Yeah.
that did bad,
Yeah.
you know? Which I always appreciate. I just I just think like I know we talked about this last time. I just think that the way that America shits on the South because like it's like the scapegoat is just so sad to me because I know how many black people are there.
Hmm. Oh
And it's
yeah.
like, okay, you're blaming us for our
Right.
own
The
oppression
majority,
essentially.
the majority of
Yeah.
African Americans still are in the South and always have
Yeah.
been. Yeah. And also, I think sort of to go back to what we were just talking about, the cost of that is we don't examine wealth and power, right? So, and I wrote a little bit about this, but when I went to see the Lehman Brothers play on Broadway, and the Lehman Brothers, right, the most important, investment bank of the 20th century began as cotton traders in Montgomery, Alabama. Or Wall Street starting as a slave market. That's the foundation of New York wealth,
Right.
right? All the stuff
Right.
that so much glamour, or, if you ever go to Newport, Rhode Island, right? I mean, Rhode Island's wealth is all wealth produced by slavery, right? And so there are
Mm,
things that we take pleasure in we treat as though they just are, right? Like, oh, there's just titans of industry. But wait, they had to rest on a foundation of something, which was unfree
right.
labor. And it is not, it's also the people up in the Northeast. And
Right.
so, yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Who was your favorite character in this one? Or who is your favorite character?
Lena, you
Okay, me too.
Florence, and because I identify with Florence, but Lena is she's just amazing, you
I
know?
love Lena too. Is that big Leo energy also?
Oh, that's interesting. Yes, she
I
does.
think so.
She has a self-possession. She does the next needed thing. She,
Yeah.
yeah.
She's very, I mean, she's very pragmatic, which I don't know if
Yes.
that's necessarily Leo. I don't
But
know.
her like sense of like confidence in it, right? That's Leo.
Yeah.
No? Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. I think this is people who are listening to the show who listen regularly. This year, somehow we've gotten off on this track where like every character we started defining, like, because we
The
did passing
astrological.
earlier this year.
Oh,
And so we were
oh.
talking about like Claire and Irene and then like, deciding what happens at the end of that book we were
What did
like
you
talking about
decide?
it. Well,
Yes.
people, if you haven't read the book, this is a
Oh,
spoiler,
sorry.
skip 30 seconds, just, I don't know, just in case.
That's
I'm certain it was a murder. I'm certain that she was pushed, but turns out that's apparently a very hot Leo take. Other people, I had a lot of Libras who had different feelings. There were so it ended up being like when we did, because I do a virtual book club for my patrons
Yeah.
where we talk about the book in person together, virtually together. It ended up being this thing of like, drop what you thought happened at the end of the book and what your sign is. And it like
Oh, that's
became
so much
this
fun.
whole thing of like, but so now this is this new trend, I guess. I feel like I've finally stepped into my full LA life of like doing astrological signs for classic literature.
That
But
would
I
be
do
really
think
fun,
Lena
though.
has big Leo energy for sure. It is fun, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and some characters, like, the author tells us when they were born.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what I just read Parable of the Sower,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Lauren is a Cancer, and it's very
Oh, that makes
she's her
perfect sense.
birthday's her birthday's July 20th, and it's like that is a
Oh,
Cancer
she's almost on the cusp. Yeah.
on the cusp. Yeah, my birthday's July 22nd, and I'm the last day of Cancer, but I was born
That's
so late at night.
that's my son's birthday. My
July
older son's birthday.
22nd?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we talked about this.
We
Is your
we may
other
have.
son a Taurus or
Yes.
something? Okay, yeah, because my husband is a Taurus. I think
Okay.
you and I like we're
We had
tweeting about
okay,
this.
yeah, okay. Great. But yeah.
But yeah, I'm technically a Leo, even though I was born the last day of Cancer.
Okay.
And my kids are born the first day of Capricorn. So very cuspy in this household. Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, so now this is my new thing is astrology for characters. Okay, I have a few questions of just like, is this what happened or not?
Okay.
Sully and Willard were lovers.
Yes.
Okay. Does Florence kill Smithy?
I don't think so.
Okay, because she beats him up.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I couldn't
don't think
tell
she
because
kills
the
him,
book
though.
starts with like I did this horrible thing, and then I
Yeah.
couldn't tell if maybe she was like writing to him being dead or not. Okay, those were my two questions of like, did this happen? Okay, the last thing I want to talk about before we talk about the title and the cover, I just want to talk about short books for a moment.
Okay.
Because Toni Morrison writes a lot of short books.
She does.
And I think that's great.
Mhm.
And in this book, she has like 7 commas total, and every paragraph is 5 pages long.
Yeah.
What is that about? I don't know about writing in that way.
Breathlessness.
Okay.
That's how I read it.
Okay.
That so I read the book as one that is intensely emotional. And so it's not it's not stream of consciousness though, but it is that like when you're like going that feeling of like that's breathy and then breathless. So I think that is how and you're inside people's minds, and sometimes they're thinking the same thing. Like there's this moment when I think it's both Lena and Rebecca have this thought when Florence is off getting the blacksmith, and she's like, where's she gone? Will they rape her? Was she, like they're having the same series of thoughts. It's like an echo. And you're inside, and that's part of why it becomes confusing, because she has scene shifts and she won't tell you you're inside somebody else's head, and you have to glean from context that you've moved to someone else altogether. So it's like it's this sensibility, and I think for me it gives me like a kind of sensory feeling about what that time and place was like, or it's an effort to it anyway. But that's my take. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. That's like, this is really not my strength because I don't write. So I don't think, I think about books as a reader. Like that's it. I don't think about, I think about structure when it comes to me when I can read it, but I don't think a lot about why things are done. And so I feel like I've started thinking more about that the more I talk to authors as they talk to me about like their process and things. I start to understand it. But she doesn't use any commas. And sometimes I found that hard, actually. I was confused I was like, wait, let me read that sentence again. This was another sort of slow read for me because I kept having to go back because I was confused a little bit. And like these long paragraphs, I was like, wait, where am I? Like I would get lost in the writing.
Yeah.
But I love a short book. Like I love a short movie.
Yeah.
I love a short play. I love brevity in narrative art. I just think it's like so, like I think of like Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys, like so short, so good. I think of Sula, so short, so good.
Yeah.
And I know that there was like someone on Twitter was talking about, some agent was saying like, we don't buy books that are short.
Oh, that was so
and I just
terrible.
It's so terrible, but also so many
great books
of the greatest books are short. And I think like when you can write a story and it can be short, it's like indicative that that person had something to say.
Yes. Oh yeah,
it's
it's a mastery of form. Like especially with someone like Morrison or Whitehead or Jessamine Ward, like when they have
Baldwin,
they can do it and have it the arc complete.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of academic books do it too. And I think maybe for different reasons. But I feel like a lot of like academic books that I like, books that are published with academic presses that I really like, are shorter. Like they're just like not always going on and on, you know? Like Maisha Cherry's book, like she got it done. That book that came out last year, Belly of the Beast, like there's not a lot, like we have things to say, we're going to say them. And I don't like all the extra. And I just feel like the short really speaks to me because I'm impressed. I'm like, wow, anybody could do Titanic in 3 hours. Let me see Titanic in 90 minutes.
There we
James
go.
Cameron.
I love it.
So the last thing we always do is talk about the cover and the title. I don't know what your cover of. I have this like, I think it's only this like pastoral one.
Same pastoral cover.
Yeah, I don't think they have redone it yet, so I'm excited about that. It's sort of blue gray with green trees, different trees, pretty. Her name is high up on mine it's foil, then it says a mercy, a novel.
I'm not crazy about this cover. I'm not crazy about it.
I love the cover.
But you know what? I don't think that I had a student several years ago, it was so brilliant. I wish I remembered all the details, who did a paper about all of the covers of Morrison's novels. And actually did research in how the covers were chosen and how they have to do with the book so often. Because I just feel like this doesn't tell me anything. I think this is a cover that says Toni Morrison is winner of the Nobel Prize, so you should buy this book. But the cover doesn't feel like it feels like anything relevant to the novel.
It doesn't do anything.
Should have been the house. The house should have been the cover. Or like,
because this looks like they're on a boat or like in a swamp or something, but that doesn't feel northern either. No. It doesn't. Yeah.
No, and the plant life doesn't look northern to me, and it looks like they're like in a lake, like they're not in the ocean, like it's not the ocean.
Yeah.
Right. So
no,
what's
it's
happening?
like a lake or like a chill river or something. Yeah.
I mean,
I'm with you.
Pretty, but it doesn't. Yeah.
But the title, on the other hand.
Oh yes.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, that moment, and I mean, it's like the second to last paragraph. I'm going to just read it. So she's talking, for people who haven't read the book, who are listening to this still, what's wrong with you? But she's talking, this is Florence's mother finally getting to talk. And she's talking about why she sent Florence away with Jacob. And she says, hoping for a miracle, he said yes. And then the paragraph starts. It was not a miracle bestowed by God. It was a mercy offered by a human. And
here's a question about punctuation, since you raised punctuation, because there's periods here. It was not a miracle, period. Bestowed by God, period. It was a mercy, period. And I love this because it wasn't a miracle bestowed by God. Like there's not a comma there.
Right.
So is it like, was it bestowed by God, or it wasn't a miracle bestowed by God? Right. Like,
right.
You know, like this, what she does with the punctuation, like actually raises questions about God as a source of mercy.
Right. Right. Because it could be, it wasn't a miracle bestowed by God.
Yeah.
Or it could be, it wasn't a miracle. It was bestowed by God.
Yeah. It could be bestowed by God, comma, it was a mercy. Right. Like to make these 3 separate sentences is a question about, like, it's a theological challenge. Like, can you put this in God's hands. Oh my God. I just think it's a genius a move. Yeah.
It's so good. And it's so late in the book because I'm always waiting for the title, especially in literature. Because often in nonfiction, the title isn't necessarily said in the book, or it's like a theme of like the idea of the book. But in a novel, I am waiting for that moment.
Yes.
And about 80% through the book, I'm like, what is a mercy though? Like I really was like, when are we getting there? Yeah. And then I finally get to the end of the book and there it is. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was worth every word to get there. Like it was one of the best title payoffs, I think, of my life as far as reading. Like I've never been so, I can't think of a time I've been so struck by a title in the book. I thought it was so good. Yeah, agreed. I don't know. I think that's it.
Yes, agreed. Yes.
Is there anything else you wanted to say or talk about this book before we get out of here?
Well, I would just say, you know what? It's short, but I think it's one of those books that's also a slow read. So for people reading it for the first time, to take time with it, and also to keep in mind that here's an entry into a world that we literally don't know. Like we don't get taught this world in history. So you have to suspend all of your assumptions about history to delve into it. But its payoff is huge because it teaches so much to me about how things got to be the way they are. Like even just really quickly, there's this moment when the free Black man is being paid and this indentured white man sees this free Black man being paid and it infuriates him. And, you see, oh, right, this is like part of the formation of race, right? Like, I mean, just there's all these just perfect little moments like that. So that's all.
Yeah, I feel like in reading the book, I missed sort of that. I like that as like the formation of how things are done. So I'm so glad we talked to you because I feel like now this book is like making more sense to me in that way. Because like, yes, of course, it's like because it's like, of course, now we're seeing race happen. We're seeing like there's the line that's like, I think it's famous. I feel like I knew it when she says to be female in this place is to be an open wound that cannot heal.
Yes.
Like, so we didn't even really talk about this, about like the women in pre-America colonies, like what that was like. But I think we also see gender get crystallized.
Oh, absolutely.
American gender
get
crystallized. And and like, you said it also about Sully and Willard, like the queerness gets crystallized. And like, I hadn't thought about any of it in that way. And I think it's really interesting. And I also think like Lena's closeness to Rebecca is also saying something about like color.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've really bumped up Toni Morrison's A Mercy for me. You did what you needed to do.
Thank you. Yes. I know. Every time I'm like, I love A Mercy, people are like, really? So it's like,
yeah,
it's now my.
Well, I went and read a review in the New York Times of this, like from when it came out, and whoever I actually didn't finish the review because I was so irritated. But whoever wrote it was like, this book is better than Paradise. Paradise sucked, and I was like, whoa, bro, they were mean to her.
I think it was Michiko Kakutani, but yeah, But here's a little tidbit I know lots of writers listen to you, so just as a little tidbit, if you want to like feel bolstered after a bad review, read the reviews of Toni Morrison's books, because people went in on her over and over again.
Constantly. Yeah. They were just shitting. It's like, whoa. I mean, but obviously it was about way more than the books.
Right. But it's also like, that's the reviews are not for writers.
Right. I try to keep that in mind all the time.
Yeah.
That's a conversation we have a lot around here, because I don't write my reviews for the writer. I write my reviews for other readers.
That's what they're for. Right. They're for other readers.
Talking to readers.
Yeah. And and it's information but writers are very precious about them. And I get it. I am too. But as a writer, you have to maintain your focus on what it is that you are here to do.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Good lesson for you writers out there. Good luck to you people, because writing is impossible. Everyone, if you haven't read it yet, please go out and get South to America by Imani Perry. If you have read it, she's got 6 more for you to read. Also, A Mercy if you haven't, or we might all have to reread it anyways. Who knows? Imani, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tracy.
And everyone else, we will see you in the stacks. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Imani Perry for being my guest. Thank you also to Caitlin Mulroney-Liskey for coordinating both of Imani's appearances on the show. All right, now it's time to announce the Stacks Book Club pick. In honor of April being National Poetry Month, we are going to tackle another poetry collection. We'll be reading Doppelgangbanger by Courtney Lamar Charleston. We'll be discussing the book on the show on Wednesday, April 27th, and you can tune in next Wednesday to find out who our guest will be. If you love the show and want inside access to it, head to patreon.com/thestacks to join the Stacks Pack. Make sure you're subscribed to the Stacks wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to leave us a rating and a review. For more from the Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram and at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter. And check out our website, thestackspodcast.com. Our editor is Christian Duenas, our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tigirigis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.